Well, as you've heard, Clive Palmer refused to take questions from the media after his announcement late today. He's due to meet the Prime Minister tomorrow morning. He joins us now live in our Parliament House studio. Thanks for being there.
It's great to see you, Tony. I'm here to answer questions.
Yep, good. What caused your Road of Damascus conversion on climate change?
Well, I guess the well-being of the Australian people and the people of the world is more important. And certainly from the knowledge I had, I think I didn't have a full picture. Meeting with the Vice President, someone who's a world authority on that, a Nobel laureate, was able to enlighten me on a number of aspects about climate change, which I wasn't fully familiar with, and the importance of it for all Australians.
Do you remember telling us back in April that you didn't believe in the scientific consensus that climate change due to global warming will have an effect on Australia? You've given that opinion away, have you?
Well, that's absolutely accurate, what I said in April. But of course, all of us can change our view given more information. And Al Gore was good enough to come to Canberra to talk to me and discuss some very important issues with me. He took the challenges that I gave him on a number of things, and I was satisfied that it is a matter of great concern. And importantly, I said that if we're going to have an ETS, it needs to be one we only have when all our trading partners have it, because we don't want to disadvantage Australian jobs.
Yeah, we'll come to that in a minute. I'm still trying to get my head around how much you've changed in the matter of 2 or 3 months. Forgive me for being just a bit cynical about this. When I asked you, again, back in April, about the consensus of scientific experts, you said, I can get a group of scientists together and pay them whatever I want to come up with any solution. What actually changed your mind here? It can't have been half an hour with Al Gore in your office today.
Oh, I've been a long stage of consultation with members of the Australian public who have contacted me about the legislation that's gone before Parliament. I've considered it, I've consulted with other experts and talked to scientists, and there's no point doing that and listening to people if you're not prepared to change your view on certain things. I don't think we've got a drastic problem that we need to worry about. I'm sure we can manage it, but it needs to be a global problem. It's not a problem for Australia, it's a problem for the whole world. OK,
did Al Gore approach you or did you approach him? How did that work?
Well, he approached me. He asked, would I have a meeting with him in Canberra? He wanted to come here and see me. It wasn't Al Gore, it was his representatives in Australia. I said I was more than happy to meet with him.
But before actually meeting him, you were forecasting this big change of mind. You only met him today, is that right? Have you met him before?
Yeah, I have met Al Gore before, when he came to Sydney a number of years ago. But certainly, it was, although I met him personally today and had discussions with him today, I was focused on a lot of the literature, a lot of looking at this particular issue, and seeing more importantly where Australia fits in the global scene. President Obama's taken action in the United States, and so has the Chinese government. They're our major trading partners. It's important that we operate in a global system where our economy will suffer, and we won't get the investment and the flows that we really need.
I've got to ask you this: did that much publicised dinner at the Wild Duck restaurant have anything to do with you changing your mind on climate change?
No, it didn't, but I know Malcolm Turnbull's a great supporter of an emissions trading scheme, and he's crossed the floor twice in Parliament already doing that. So I guess these are some of the differences you have in politics. That's why we have a great nation where we can all think different things. What
did Al Gore say to you exactly that changed your mind?
Well, it wasn't any one thing. It was a number of things he said to me over a long time about what will happen. I thought the most profound thing he said to me was that in 10 years' time, this will be the most important decision for our planet and for our country. And Australia really doesn't have a large amount of carbon emissions in a global sense, but it can play a key role to be a catalyst to bring the United States and China together. And that's what we think our suggestion of a ETS, which is conditional upon other countries joining together, is what's best for Australia.
Why shouldn't we regard this whole piece of admittedly extraordinary political theatre as nothing more than a stunt, like your old boss, Joh Bjelke-Petersen, used to do, feeding the chooks to keep them occupied?
Well, you don't look like a chook to me, Tony. You look like a very skilled journalist and a very capable person.
Well,
you're hardly a chook. You're hardly a chook,
only because I know what you thought just a couple of months ago. Obviously, we're a little bit cynical about this sudden change of heart. Is it about politics? Is it about becoming a true believer in climate change? What is it?
Well, you've got to approach an issue with an open mind and have a look at what's best overall. I mean, I'm not a 100% convert to the carbon tax. We want to abolish the carbon tax because it's a very high price of carbon, much higher than international prices. It disadvantages our business. If we have to have a emissions trading scheme, it needs to be comparable with other parts of the world so we don't lose jobs, don't lose manufacturing. But we can't put our head in the sand if this is a global issue that everyone's joining up for.
All right, your senators plan to pass legislation repealing the carbon tax. Will that be contingent on anything? For example, or on anything that you haven't told us so far? For example, on the government agreement on an emissions trading scheme? Will it be contingent on an emissions trading scheme?
The repeal of the carbon tax is contingent upon the government bringing into law a system where that the energy producers will refund the benefit to their consumers. So that it's not unfair to think we repeal the carbon taxes and electricity prices remain so high for Australians. So that's what we're mainly concerned with on that particular bill. You've got to remember these are all 11 separate bills, so they're not all interlinked.
So, but you won't make your repeal of the carbon tax contingent on any of these other things you want to see happen. That's a critical question to answer tonight.
That's right, yeah.
So Tony Abbott, when he negotiates with you tomorrow, going on what Greg Hunt is saying today, will be able to offer you fairly easily the kind of agreement that you've asked for. Does that mean you're now convinced you'll vote the carbon tax out of existence?
If that's the case, it is, and we'll then be bringing an ETS as a amendment to the Climate Change Authority repeal bill, and seeing if we can introduce it that way to the Senate and have it passed by the Senate.
So, can you just explain that one more time? Because you don't want the Climate Change Authority repealed, so how can you link the two things together?
Well, it's the bill, and we'll be amending that bill to introduce a ETS, which will only take effect on on other countries operating an ETS into that bill.
Yes, but you want to keep the Climate Change Authority, is that right?
As well, yeah.
So if that is linked into a bill to remove the carbon tax, you won't be able to vote for it, isn't that right?
Well, it's not linked into a bill to remove the carbon tax. It's an individual bill.
OK, I think I've misunderstood you there.
Yeah.
Will your repeal of the carbon tax be contingent on anything? Let's just get this straight. You very clearly said today you reject the direct action policies of the government.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
So you won't make your repeal of the carbon tax bill in any way contingent on that?
No.
No, OK. The Greens have asked the obvious question. Are you aware that the carbon tax is in fact the first stage of an emissions trading scheme? It is in fact legislated as an emissions trading scheme and can go to a flexible price as soon as someone amended it, or as it's due to do next year. It is an emissions trading scheme already. Why do you need another one?
Well, it's not actually. It's a fixed price. It's a fixed price this year, and the fixed price is probably around 4 or 5 times higher than the international price. It costs us jobs. It's cost us enterprise. So that's just rubbish. There's no emissions trading scheme operating in Australia at the moment.
No,
it's just
the
not
emissions
true.
trading scheme is built into the legislation. All one would have to do theoretically is to amend it to bring the floating price forward, which is what Labor attempted to do.
Well, we'll just chuck it out.
So you want a brand new emissions trading scheme starting from the floor up. As you've got the legislation ready?
Yeah, we have, but we want to have a scheme which is conditional upon other countries and doesn't become operable until those countries do that, introduce a similar measure.
So, in fact, the scheme is zero rated, or your scheme is zero rated, which means zero impact. So nothing would happen with your emissions trading scheme at all until what? Until all governments had national schemes exactly like that one?
No, we've already named in our press release the 5 critical governments that we see. Well, that is China, the United States of America, Europe, Japan and Korea.
And all of them would have to have identical emissions trading schemes to the one that you're bringing. You're talking about creating a model for the rest of the world. Is that what you're proposing?
Well, we're creating a model, and we're saying this is what the price will be determined of a major basket with our trading companies, trading partners. And that's, I think, very important because we don't want it to impact on Australian jobs or Australian industry.
Who is writing the legislation for your emissions trading scheme, since a tremendous amount of effort went into creating an emissions trading scheme in the first place?
Well, the existing legislation in the carbon tax, a lot of that will be utilised in our amendment, but it'll be conditional upon what I've just said, and of course the price will have to be set by a future government when that becomes applicable.
All right. The Al Gore publicly congratulated you on your plans to reject any government bills which abolish the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, the Renewable Energy Target, and the Climate Change Authority. What changed your mind on those 3 bodies? Because I remember speaking to you about this and you were pretty sceptical about the Renewable Energy Target, among others.
Well, the Clean Energy Bill, for example, is making money. It employs a lot of people. I just can't see the point in abolishing a successful commercial operation and putting people out of work. And I just don't see a reason to do that. In relation to the renewable energy target, Tony Abbott promised before the election he wouldn't touch it or abolish it. And Tony Abbott's broken a number of promises, and I think we should hold him accountable. He wanted to review it straight away. We've said that you shouldn't review it until 2016, after the next election, so the people of Australia have got a chance to to vote on it. So it's about accountability. We saw all the broken promises in the budget, and we can't allow this to continue.
Well, Tony Abbott will tell you tomorrow, no doubt, that the renewable energy target was up for review, and they're reviewing it. Are you saying they don't have the right to do that?
I'm saying that he promised there'd be no changes to it, right, before the last election. So he's broken so many promises that, you know, people forget their standards. We don't want a government that breaks promises. We want one that sticks with their promises.
Now, Christine Milne has asked, did you mean to include on the list the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, or have you carved that out of the climate change agencies that you want to keep?
Well, that wasn't one of the bills that we considered. The bills we considered were the ones we made the announcement on.
Does that mean you just haven't thought about this one, or you plan to think about it later?
There's no final decision on that one. We announced today the final decisions on a number of bills, and we didn't want to confuse the Australian public by being too extensive.
But are you prepared to consider that one? Because these are a suite of agencies which all work to one purpose.
Well, not really. We'll have to have a look at that. But at the moment, I'm just answering a question. We haven't decided.
Now, the Climate Change Authority was set up to give independent advice to the government on what targets it should set and to advise on what action other countries have already taken. So are you prepared, in fact, since you want to keep this body, to be guided by its advice on what the target should be and what the price on carbon should be?
Well, we're making it by reference to our trading partners, and we're giving that body the responsibility of monitoring that and advising us when the preconditions are met to Parliament and to the government for other countries adopting a similar scheme. So they'll have a very active role to play.
Yes, but are you planning to change what are you planning to introduce legislation which changes what the Climate Change Authority does? Because they're an independent body set up to do those things I just set out. So I guess what I'm asking you very clearly is, if they are an independent body that you value, would you take their advice?
Well, I'm not the government, Tony, but I'd be setting out some additional items for them to do and some additional works in the amendment. That's what we're working on at the moment. Well,
you're not the government, obviously, but you're operating in a way to manipulate what the government is planning to do. And in the case of the ETS, to design one yourself. So I suppose, are you prepared to take advice from the experts, would be the big question.
Well, I mean, as I said to you before, the ETS infrastructure is virtually designed at the present moment. A lot of work has gone into that. We're not throwing any of that away. So that's not, not truth to say that we're redesigning it ourselves. And certainly we'll take advice, but whether we'll decide to accept it's another thing. We'll listen to advice. We'll try to make the best decision. All right.
Do you value now, because you didn't before, the advice that you'll get from scientific and other experts in this field?
Well, we'll certainly weigh it up. When you get advice, you weigh it up. You may get advice on competing issues, and you have to look at what's consistent and what's the best thing.
But are you looking really at politics here? Are you looking what's politically palatable to the people who might vote for you?
Not really. I mean, I'm not a politician. I was elected, I guess, a little bit by chance, but I've got a high commitment to try to do the right thing, the best of my ability.
It's impossible to separate out your climate backflips from raw politics. So let me ask you this obvious question. Are you trying to put the government in a position where Tony Abbott has to go to a double dissolution election to get key elements of his budget and his climate change policies through?
Well, one of the most important things in politics is listening to people. There's no point listening to people if you don't prepared to change your mind or have an open mind. Our politicians should listen more than tell people what they should do. I'm trying to reflect some of the representations that we've had since we've been elected to Parliament, and the ones that we've taken seriously. We've investigated them, and we've come to a conclusion on these things. So I'm trying to be transparent by announcing those things. And Vice President Gore came here of his own volition to Canberra because he knew about that, and he thought these are outstanding decisions for the benefit of the whole world.
Yes, but you appreciate the political consequences of blocking large parts of Tony Abbott's agenda, his political agenda, his budget agenda, his climate change agenda. Much of this will be blocked as a result of your decisions. So I'm just asking you, are you anticipating that he might respond with a double dissolution election?
I don't think he'll do that, and it's not the Liberal or the Labor way, it's the right way. That's what we want to do. And, if he wants to do that, it's a matter for him. If I get defeated in the next election, that's a matter for the Australian people. But while I'm here, I'll do what I think's the right thing to do.
Are you actually doing this and basically ditching your previous beliefs, as we saw at the very beginning of this interview and the beginning of this program, your previous interviews? Are you seeking to reach out to a new group of voters who otherwise would not have voted for the Palmer United Party?
No, I'm just seeking to do what I think is the best for the country. And if people vote for us or not, that's not a consideration. I just want to do what I think is the best as a citizen of this nation.
Speaking of citizens of this nation, Al Gore is not one of those. Returning to his extraordinary appearance, the US Vice President standing next to you in the Great Hall of the Australian Parliament, effectively endorsing a series of policies which go against what the elected government wants to do. A lot of people are going to see that and think this is interference from an outsider, unjustifiable. What do you think about that?
Well, Al Gore, like me, is a citizen of the world, and this is a global issue, and he's concerned about what happens to our planet. I think he's quite entitled to do that. We'll have the Japanese Prime Minister in Parliament next week, I think, and he'll be expressing his opinion. Tony Abbott went to the United States. He expressed his opinion, and to Canada, we saw that. I mean, we have freedom of thought.
I think you can pretty much guarantee that none of those people will get up with a leader of a minority party and endorse a series of policies which go against what the government wants to do.
Well, I don't know. Al Gore is not a politician. He hasn't been in politics for a number of years. He's a citizen of the world, and he had a strong point to put. He's down in Melbourne training people this weekend on other things. So I don't think he's bound after, what is it, nearly 14 years or so since he's been a Vice President.
Let me ask you another question that people will ask. Did Al Gore come to Canberra to join you entirely on his own incentive, or did you pay him in any way?
Nothing. Of course, he didn't pay us. We would have liked to got a donation for the Palmer United Party, but we weren't lucky enough to get one.
So you were trying to get some sort of donation?
So it would have been good if he wanted to donate to us, but he didn't want to.
Let's just clear this up, though. You paid him nothing because...
Zero. We bought him lunch or dinner.
Right. Now, finally, I've got to ask you, is this a brilliant sleight of hand to keep voters and journalists from focusing on allegations that $12 million disappeared mysteriously from a fund operating ports in Western Australia?
Well, it didn't disappear.
As alleged by your Chinese partners.
No, our Chinese partners want to come to Australia and bring over Chinese workers and undermine Australian working standards and have people work for nothing. That's why they're saying these things. They're not true at all. They owe us tens of millions of dollars. There's no money missing from anywhere. It's an invention of Hedley Thomas and Rupert Murdoch. It's just rubbish.
Well, it seems to be an allegation made by your partners that $12 million has gone missing from this.
Well, that's just not true.
Fund.
There's no allegation made by them.
There's no action taken by them. Can you sort that out for the public? Because it's on the front page of the major newspaper pretty regularly, this allegation. I mean,
well, it's just the Australian.
To put these accounts out there so people can have a look at this?
Well, I mean, no, there's no... I mean, if what they said was true, they'd take some action against us, wouldn't they? There's no action against us in any of these matters. It's just rubbish.
Well, the reports keep suggesting that the police are going to be investigating these
what
matters.
Police? That's just a lot of bullshit, you know? So, you know, people don't like me because I'm in politics and I'm happy to say what I think and I won't be intimidated by the Australian. It's good for fish and chips, but not much else.
Falling iron ore prices, I should say, a civil war with your Chinese partners in WA, falling coal prices.
I mean, I don't know.
Let me just go through some of these things. Huge coal assets locked down in the Galilee Basin, questions over the profitability of other key businesses. Are you, as some suggest, frantically juggling all of these things to keep the Palmer empire from falling apart?
I don't have an empire, Tony. I'm just a member of Parliament. I'm retired from my businesses. I couldn't care what happens to them, really. I've got they say in the BRW my wealth's gone from $2 billion to $1 billion. I couldn't care if it was $100 million or 50 cents. I'm a citizen of this country, and I won't be stopped by people saying all this rubbish about me. I'll just express my opinion. It's up to the people of Australia if they want to elect me. I'm a representative in Parliament of the Australian people.
I've got to ask you one last question. Are you a story that no one would believe if it was written as fiction?
I don't know, Tony. I'm just a human being and an Australian. And my family's had a strong commitment to this country for a long time.
Clive Palmer, we thank you very much for joining us. Always fascinating. A very dramatic day in Australian politics, an interesting one. We'll see how it pans out over the coming days.
God bless you, Tony. You're a great journalist.
Yes, we won't go there. Thank you.